Back in 2017, I made the video about how the 2020 election is going to be Elizabeth Warren over Donald Trump. At that snapshot back in 2017, there were a lot of questions as to, is there even a shot that Donald Trump is going to be removed from office? And here, it is looking inevitable right now that the only way the Republican Party is going to survive here is if they have to inevitably flip on Donald Trump and all of the Russian crime associates of the deep state, which brings me to this other thought here, that the Zionist powers that be, they put Donald Trump in there because they know their history and they know everything about history because of three things here. Number one is the pre-planned financial economic crash of 2019 that is about to hit the United States of America. Again, that video back in 2017, I've been predicting the big Trumponomic disaster of 2019. That's what's happening today. When we increase spending, when we cut taxes for the rich, well, the rich just pocket that money. They don't spend it. So the tax cuts are not paying for itself. And because the deficits are so high and that, all the geniuses here, all of us geniuses here knew that this was a recipe for disaster, because we have to borrow even more money right now, that's just going to raise interest rates even more. It's just one factor as to why they raise interest rates. Number two is that economic growth is slowing down, so the cost of borrowing money has to be higher as well, because you're not going to gain much activity when you borrow money. So these are two factors, but the tax bill makes it even worse. It allows them to raise interest rates even faster than anticipated. That is what's happening right now with the Fed. And keep in mind that the Fed is politically independent. Anytime you hear Donald Trump attacking Jerome Powell, remember, Donald Trump appointed Jerome Powell. It's just deflection about what's about to happen, because he is responsible for the rise of interest rates, because he signed this bill. And he did say, well, you all got a lot richer. There is that. So the deep state put Donald Trump in here to collapse the economy because they understand that the Smoot-Hawley Act of, 1932 or whatever? Well, Trump's tariffs were enacted 88 years later. And in Gematria, the Kabbalah code of, coding letters and words into numbers really explains this. Because Trump equals 88, it is Elizabeth that equals 88. I think it is economic crisis or economic crash that equals 88, or financial crash that equals 88. But all this is happening under Donald Trump. And what the big scam of the tax bill was that we, the billionaires and the large corporations, were going to get the tax breaks. But America's paying for the tariffs, right? But who's really paying for it? It's you, dum-dum. It's not the company that's paying for the tariffs. It's going to be you, the consumer, dum-dum. Okay, it's going to be you, little Trump fan, that's going to be paying for the tariffs. That's how he's turned you into a sucker, is that the consumers are going to pay for net economic losses associated with the 25% tariffs are going to be enacted right before 2019. That's going to make things even worse. This is the worst fourth quarter I think it's the Dow ever since the Great Recession. I have to go back to what I read about that. The Smoot-Hawley Act, as you know, prolonged the recession that turned to the Great Depression. It prolonged it. It made it worse. It did not help at all, because you have something called retaliatory tariffs. And so when you lose out on your exports, the goods that you send to other countries that are produced in America. When you produce less, then you work for less hours. And in the case, it turns into a net job loss as well. So this is how they understand their world history. And this is what they use in order to pre-engineer these crises. It is because they understand what happens in history, which brings us to the next point, is that the deep state put Donald Trump in there so the people look dumb at the end. So you give the powers that be more control. Oh, your Donald Trump is a great businessman. He's going to fight for the people. He's going to build a wall, right? Oh, he's going to make America great again. Yeah, right? Sister Trump dum-dum. That's what Trump dum-dum MAGA says, okay? When you do this, when you say, oh, Trump is outside the establishment, it turns out what the people want was wrong, then you end up giving more power to the elites. Well, why would you trust all these stupid-ass people when they blindly supported a guy that refused to pay workers or refused to pay anyone, lawyers, suppliers, a guy that's had a track record of not paying for his bills? That is what Donald Trump is. He has conned everyone through history. He's not even a real billionaire because he had to inherit that money first before he could go on the Forbes 400 list. This is a guy that bankrupted a casino. This is a guy that associates himself with criminals. So the deep state, they rigged it against Bernie. This guy was going to bring everyone together. He was going to raise taxes to help pay for Social Security, Medicare, better education, and job programs for these jobs here that are going overseas because these jobs are being automated. Automation is inevitable in this economy. So supporting a mobster, Donald Trump, who seems to associate himself with really, really, really bad people. Paul Manafort, an unregistered foreign agent, has lobbied on behalf of pro-Russian oligarchs and pro-Russian Ukrainian puppets. He was put in there by Donald Trump because, number one, the people, of course, the elite said you the people had to support, a rich guy giving everything on a silver platter instead of Bernie Sanders. They didn't want Bernie Sanders to win. And how they rigged this election was that the Democratic Party didn't even campaign in the states that they needed to win. So you knew that today's centrist Democratic Party, they're really a center-right party today, Democrats. They're not even a progressive party. Since do not forget that Bernie Sanders himself was independent. He was not a Democrat for all these years. He did not partake in NAFTA, whatnot, that resulted in devastation through many communities in America, that resulted in all these jobs shipped overseas. And really what that rigged thing was all about was saying, oh, we're going to give you all these cheap consumer goods, but oops, many people are not making as much as they were before. So what were they really gaining? NAFTA was a scam and a fugazi as well. And let's bring us to the next point. We have Donald Trump, the mobster here, who is colluding with Russia, is committing conspiracy against the United States. When Donald Trump says, I'm going to be one story above, Donnie Jr., you're going to meet with the Russians. This meeting is all about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump even bragged a day before the meeting that I'm going to have some big information on Hillary Clinton. It turns out they didn't at the meeting, but at that moment in time, they're openly conspiring against the United States of America. And why was it that, there was no meeting, and then it was all about Russian adoptions? Donald Trump made up that part. And then when it wasn't about Russian adoptions, there was no collusion. And then it went from no collusion to, collusion's not a crime. So they cannot even keep their lies straight And that's how you know that collusion is happening. So the people end up supporting a puppet of a foreign government. You see, the deep state's not going to give power to the people if they put a guy in there that turns out to be a mobster. When you hear Donald Trump talk over the course of the debates and whatnot, and you see him just personally attack and really say and really just slander people in really obnoxious ways. Just, oh, I like people who weren't captured, yada, 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 and the way he talked about Ted Cruz's wife and all of that. I mean, that guy just speaks like a mobster. He acts like a mobster. He doesn't have any class because he associates himself with criminals. Donald Trump Jr. even said before that we get all of our money from Russia. So did Eric Trump too, because remember, Donald Trump, that idiot, bankrupted a casino. He does not even own all of the buildings that have his name on it. He just licenses out his name to the true owners of the buildings, and that's how you spread the con around. And you print in bold letters, oh, Donald Trump is worth $10 billion, yada, yada, yada. And since Donald Trump has had a lot of trouble, he even tried to screw over his dad when he was about to die. Because Donald Trump wanted to collateralize the family will to cover his debt, since Donald Trump does not even have assets to collateralize to help, pay for his bankruptcies and all of that. So he wanted to screw over his siblings by wanting to collateralize the will that they were set to inherit. That is what Donald Trump did. This man cannot even get a loan from a bank. So understand, this is why Russian oligarchs are keeping his businesses afloat. They launder money to Trump Tower. Now, how do they launder money to Trump Tower? Which brings us an interesting fact, too, that Paul Manafort, agent of the Russian government, was renting from Trump Tower. Very interesting enough. And even the FBI was listening onto Trump Tower in all these contacts with the Russians, because how they would launder money to Trump Tower, they would try to fake a transaction to seem like they're buying an apartment over at Trump Tower. So the money is sent over the Trump. The transaction says that they're going to pay for rent for this apartment, but the money never really went to rent. And maybe these Russian oligarchs or these Russian agents were not staying at these apartments at Trump Tower. The money was going directly to Donald Trump, but the transaction seems like, they're paying rent for this apartment at Trump Tower. So this is how he is laundering money to Trump Tower, and he's been doing this for centuries because, once again, he cannot get money from a bank. So this is the perfect scenario here. One of the last things I'm going to bring up is that you never hear this in the mainstream media. You never hear this on Fox. You never hear this on MSN. You never hear this on CNN. But over the course of time, Vladimir Putin has been funding these far-right candidates in Europe because what is about to happen is instability and a World War III in which Vladimir Putin wants to exert more influence in the region. He wants to create a greater Slavic state. The Hitler Anschluss was all about taking over territories of high populations of German speakers and legitimizing it by saying they identify as German because they speak German and they're of German descent. So this area should be part of Germany, and that is what Hitler did when he annexed Austria and when he invaded Poland and the Czech Republic. These areas had high populations of German speakers. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 by Vladimir Putin was legitimized by saying, hey, these people over there, these are mostly Russian speakers. They belong to Russia. And what Vladimir Putin here is trying to create a greater Slavic state, because the Soviet Union was broken up and all these countries became their own independent countries, all these areas of the old Soviet Union. So what Vladimir Putin is trying to do is to create a greater Slavic state, and this is why Donald Trump was put in there to want to destabilize and defund NATO by, we don't need to be giving money to all our allies, whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But what NATO is all about is preventing another world war. And when Donald Trump wants to say that the EU is a greater foe than China and Russia, and when he wants to defund NATO, well, whose interest does that help? That's not in the best interest of our allies. It's not in the best interest of America. This is in the best interest of Vladimir Putin, people. Wake up. At the Helsinki summit, Donald Trump said that our investigative agencies are all a joke, pretty much, that there was no interference in the elections. He committed treason at the Helsinki summit, but you understand this is why he supports Vladimir Putin. And the deep state has put Donald Trump in there to start World War III. And because Donald Trump has not paid his debts to Wall Street and the bankers, he is in a lot of trouble. And at the end of the day, they're just not going to give him more power to settle his debts. They're going to make him a fall guy at the end because he really screwed over a lot of rich people, not just poor people, but rich people, people on Wall Street, all the big banks on Wall Street. He screwed over these guys. And he insists he did not have to pay because he's such a raging narcissist. So he's going to be a fall guy at the end. He does not realize this, but he is going down with the beast and the powers that be that gave him power in the first place. The number one punishment that Trump is going to do is not merely to serve the interests of Wall Street and to the international bankers that are trying to kickstart World War III by having a Russian puppet in the White House right now. You see, Donald Trump is part of the deep state. He is his perfect deep state puppet to start the financial crash and to serve the interests of Vladimir Putin to destabilize the West. That is the end game here. But Donald Trump is toast. The elites are going to bring him down. His punishments for fucking with Wall Street for all these years, for not paying them back, is going to be tarnishing the Trump name and destroying the Trump brand itself. So Trump's family is going down. The Russian collusion scandal is really going to set off in 2019. A very Mueller Christmas is about to be upon us. Mueller sent the questions to Donald Trump that he already knows the answers to. He already has copies of his tax returns. And this is why Trump is going to be removed from office and his name fully tarnished forever in the history books. And number two, if his family members are in jail, if Donald Trump is in jail too, then yes, thanks for playing. You were president of the United States. You thought you were the most powerful puppet in the world, but ultimately your actions were going to be your downfall, and the deep state wasn't going to go down with Donald Trump, and the Republicans were not going to go down with Donald Trump. The Republicans are ready to hand the reins over to Mike Pence, and Donald Trump's ultimate punishment is going to be removal from office. Worst of all, it's going to be conviction for some of his family members, like Kushner and Donald Trump Jr. are going to be going to prison. Donald, is he going to prison? He might. He may resign or be convicted from the presidency, and his name will live on in disgrace. So this is exactly what's happening here. Is Trump is going to go down because he did not pay back a lot of very powerful people that are orchestrating geopolitical conflict today.